The man standing at the gates of the Grand Business Convention looked completely out of place. His faded brown shirt was wrinkled from years of use, his boots were dusty with dried mud, and his sunburned hands carried the rough marks of a lifetime spent working the soil. People walking past him in expensive suits and polished shoes barely tried to hide their smirks. A few whispered to each other, while others openly laughed as they passed the old pickup truck he had parked nearby. No one knew that the quiet farmer standing there was the richest man in the entire country. Before we continue this emotional story, take a quick moment to support the channel. If you believe that kindness matters more than appearances and that everyone deserves respect no matter how they look, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world about humanity. The farmer's name was Daniel Countr. For nearly 40 years, Daniel had lived on the same quiet piece of land far away from the noise of the city. His farm stretched across rolling hills that turned golden every summer and deep green every spring. To outsiders, it looked like an ordinary farm. The wooden house was simple, the barn had been repaired many times with old boards, and the fields were worked using equipment that looked decades old. But what people never saw was the mind behind it all. Daniel was not just a farmer. He was a visionary who had spent his life quietly building one of the most successful agricultural empires in the world. Years earlier, when Daniel was just a young man, he had inherited a small, nearly bankrupt farm from his father. The land was dry, the soil had been poorly managed, and the farm barely produced enough crops to survive. Many people told him to sell the land and move to the city. Even his friends believed the farm had no future. But Daniel had made a promise to his father on the night before he passed away. Standing beside the hospital bed, holding his father's fragile hand, Daniel had promised he would never give up on the land that had raised their family for generations. That promise became the foundation of his life. For years, Daniel worked harder than anyone around him. He woke up before sunrise and stayed in the fields until long after sunset. His hands bled from blisters, his back ached constantly, and there were winters when he could barely afford enough food to get through the season. But during those long nights, Daniel studied. He read books about soil science, climate patterns, crop rotation, and agricultural technology. He experimented with new methods long before they became popular. He invested every small profit back into improving the land. Slowly, something incredible began to happen. The soil became richer. The crops grew stronger. The harvests became larger every year. Other farmers started noticing Daniel's success and asked him for advice. Instead of keeping his knowledge to himself, Daniel helped them. He shared techniques that improved their yields and helped entire communities survive difficult seasons. Over time, investors approached him. They saw the potential of his innovative farming methods and offered to partner with him. Daniel agreed, but only under one condition: the farms would remain focused on sustainable agriculture that protected the land. What began as a struggling farm grew into a network of agricultural companies that supplied food across the country and eventually around the world. Daniel quietly became the majority owner of several large food production companies, technology farms, and agricultural research centers. Yet despite becoming unimaginably wealthy, Daniel never changed his lifestyle. He still woke up before sunrise. He still worked in the fields with his workers. And he still wore the same simple clothes that carried the smell of earth and sunlight. For Daniel, wealth was never about luxury. It was about responsibility. Which is why, on that particular morning, he had driven his old truck to the capital city. The government had organized a national agriculture investment summit where powerful CEOs, politicians, and investors gathered to discuss the future of food production. Many of Daniel's companies were directly involved in supplying the nation's crops, but very few people actually knew what he looked like. Daniel preferred it that way. As he approached the entrance of the luxurious convention center, security guards immediately stepped in front of him. Their eyes scanned his worn clothes and dusty boots with clear judgment. One guard told him politely but firmly that the event was for invited guests only. Daniel calmly reached into his pocket and handed over the official invitation he had received weeks earlier. The guard stared at the name printed on the card. His expression changed for a brief second, but instead of letting Daniel through, he chuckled quietly and called another guard over. The two of them exchanged amused glances, clearly assuming the invitation must be fake. Meanwhile, several wealthy attendees nearby began watching the scene with interest. A group of businessmen standing near the entrance whispered to each other and laughed openly. To them, the idea that a dusty farmer belonged at one of the most elite economic conferences in the country was ridiculous. Daniel stood there silently. He had faced much worse in life than a few mocking laughs. One of the businessmen walked closer and sarcastically asked whether Daniel had gotten lost on his way to the nearest farm supply store. Another suggested that maybe the event organizers were now inviting farmers so they could learn how real business worked. The laughter grew louder, but Daniel's calm expression never changed. Inside the convention hall, a large presentation was about to begin. The host stepped onto the stage and announced that the keynote speaker for the morning would be arriving shortly. The audience of hundreds of executives and investors waited with curiosity. The speaker was someone rarely seen in public but widely respected across the global agricultural industry. The host described him as a visionary who had revolutionized modern farming, built a global food network, and helped prevent food shortages in multiple countries. Whispers spread through the crowd. Many people were eager to finally meet this mysterious billionaire whose companies dominated the agricultural market. Outside the entrance, the guards were still debating whether to remove Daniel from the area when a black luxury car pulled up beside the gates. Several event organizers rushed out to greet the arriving guest. But as they looked around, confusion spread across their faces. The VIP they were expecting had not stepped out of the car. Instead, one of the organizers suddenly noticed the old farmer standing near the entrance. His eyes widened in shock. He immediately hurried toward Daniel with visible urgency, pushing past the guards and the businessmen who had been coughing moments earlier. When he reached Daniel, the organizer bowed his head respectfully and greeted him with words that froze everyone nearby. "Mr. Countr, we've been waiting for you." Silence fell instantly. The businessmen who had been mocking him stared in disbelief. The guards looked at the invitation again, suddenly realizing what they had almost done. The humble farmer they had laughed at was the keynote speaker of the entire summit. The richest man in the country. Inside the massive conference hall, Daniel walked calmly toward the stage while hundreds of eyes followed him with astonishment. His clothes were still simple. His boots still carried dried mud from his farm. But now the room was silent with respect. When Daniel finally stood behind the microphone, he looked across the audience slowly. His eyes carried the wisdom of decades spent working the land. He spoke softly, yet every word echoed through the silent hall. He told them about his father's farm, about the nights when he almost gave up, about the years of failure and learning. He spoke about soil, about patience, about responsibility toward the land and the people who depend on it. He reminded them that food did not begin in boardrooms or stock markets. It began with farmers, with hands in the soil, with sweat under the sun, with hope planted in every seed. Many people in the audience felt something shift inside them. Some of the same executives who had laughed outside now sat quietly with lowered eyes. Daniel explained that true success was not measured by wealth, but by how many lives were improved because of your work. His companies had become successful because they focused on helping farmers grow stronger, not replacing them. He ended his speech with a simple message. Never judge a person by their appearance. Because sometimes the quietest people carry the greatest stories. The room exploded into applause that seemed to last forever. But the moment that truly mattered came later. Outside the building, the same group of businessmen who had mocked Daniel earlier waited nervously near the entrance. When Daniel walked out, they approached him with embarrassed expressions. They apologized for their behavior. Daniel listened quietly. Then he smiled gently and told them something they would remember for the rest of their lives. He said that the land had taught him one important lesson: every seed deserves a chance to grow. People were no different. Before we reach the end of this story, I want to ask something special from you. If you're still watching, please write the word respect in the comments to show that you believe every person deserves dignity no matter how they look. That single word helps spread the message of this story further. Years later, Daniel's speech from that day continued to circulate online. Millions of people watched the video of the humble farmer walking onto the stage while wearing muddy boots. For many viewers, it was a powerful reminder that greatness often hides behind simplicity. Daniel returned to his farm that same evening. The golden fields were glowing under the sunset, and the wind moved softly through the crops. He stepped out of his truck and walked through the rows of plants just as he had done thousands of times before. To the world, he was the richest man in the country. But to Daniel, he was simply a farmer keeping a promise to his father. And sometimes, the richest people in the world are the ones who never forget where they came from. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who might need this reminder today, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about kindness, humility, and real-life inspiration. Because sometimes a simple story can plant a seed that changes someone's life forever.